We are going to set up this really fun interaction in Webflow. I'm Tim at Tickyboom Design. Let's go. All right, welcome to section 1. We're going to set up the basics here. All right, so first step, we're going to go ahead and create a div. This div is going to wrap everything. So naturally, we're going to call it a checkbox wrapper. Then inside of that, we're going to actually flex it, and we're going to flex it left and then centered. And we're flexing it left because we want all the elements to go from left to right. So in a real world example, if you have a bunch of checkboxes and you have some labels that are super long and some labels that are short, we want to make sure everything is still aligned to the left. What I'm doing right now is I'm making a check mark wrapper, and then inside of it we're going to have some spines. So this is going to be for the check mark icon. I'm calling it a spine because, I don't know, literally it looks like a spine. It's up and down. So that's what we're calling it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and style this spine. So this is going to be the up and down. And then I'm going to copy the CSS class after I duplicate this element. And then I'm going to create the horizontal spine. And so basically doing it this way, it's a lot quicker. I have pretty much all the styling all set up. All I have to do is change a couple things, and it gives me a good flexibility. I could go either way about using the add-on class. I don't know. I find that duplicating the CSS class and making edits from there, it feels a little bit cleaner. But again, you do it the way that you feel is the best. The moral of the story is we're creating a checkbox icon out of divs, which is super fun. We can obviously make a SVG element, and we can, with DOM elements in Webflow, we can manipulate each part of the SVG element. But I found that if I can make some simple stuff, I can do a lot of interactions on the divs, and which you'll see here in a second when we get into the video. So right now, what I am doing is I am creating a wrapper for the checkbox icon. And the reason I'm doing that is we need to rotate the icon. So in order to do that, we need to wrap them all together so that way we can just rotate it. So we're doing that. I'm going over to the rotate, and we're going to do on the Z axis, and I think I end up going to 30 or 40. I don't know why it chose 17. That is an odd rotation. And then I thought, hey, why not? Let's stick with the 17 degrees. So I think I'm going to go over that again and do that again. As you can tell right here, I'm doing some maths. And you're probably wondering, why did I do it that way? Oh, here we go. Come on, what am I doing? 24? No. 30? Am I doing 30? Oh, I think I stick at 30. Okay. And then actually, because you rotate it, whenever you rotate an element that was not rotated to begin with, you need to make some optical adjustments to make sure that it's center aligned, which is what I'm doing. I'm doing very small amounts, just kind of nudging it just a little bit. And again, back to the thing I was talking about before, the maths. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking the pixel equivalent and converting them into rems. So in my Figma design file, I'm working in pixels, and I want to try to get it as pixel perfect as possible, but also we're on the web and there's hundreds of devices and different ways that people use their browsers. So we got to make an element of it fluid. Now we're in section 2, just FYI. Let me go back to my rant about the fluidity. So the maths that I'm doing is, so for example, let's say an element is 40 pixels, and then I'll do the slash and then 16 rem. What that's basically saying is 40 pixel equivalent converted into rems, that the HTML element is set to 16 pixel type size. That's what that is. Hope that makes sense. The huge advantage of this is, well, a couple things. You could set your HTML element to be fluid units. So viewport width, you could do a 16 pixel equivalent at viewport width. And then as you move your screen, basically you're going to have a completely fluid design. There's some disadvantages and advantages to that. One disadvantage is some things can get small before they hit the other breakpoint. And then I believe also accessibility. There's some accessibility issues. So a kind of approach that I like to take sometimes is I'll do everything in rems, usually 16 pixel rem for, for my regular desktop size. If I go bigger, I can set the HTML element to about 21 pixel or something like that, and everything gets bigger all at once. Everything that has a rem element, boom, done. So I like to do that. And then if I go, to tablet, I might go to like 18 pixels, or maybe even like, depending on what it looks like, 18 pixels. And then mobile, I'll start something like 14.75. And usually that does a lot of the work for you, and then you kind of fine tune. And again, as always, even working with Webflow and their amazing tool, there's nothing that quite beats holding a device in your hand and making adjustments from there. All right, back to this. We're now making the line out. So the line out is a div, and the flexibility of being able to use this as a div means that we can have the line in, go like that with the interaction. And what I did here is I did a line out wrapper. So the line out wrapper is, we're on this next section. This is a fun one. So we're going to make the magic burst. The magic burst is a little tricky, but once we get our head around it, it's easy, and you can use this technique for anything. So there's a couple things that we need to do. One is we are trying to essentially have a knockout. So there's a gap between the check mark box and the bursts and the dots and all that. And basically what that is it's the burst wrapper is going to have a background element, a div that's absolute positioned, and it is going to be the same color as the background. The other thing too to notice is when I absolute positioned it, it goes over to I made it go over to the left. And since it is actually 8 pixels bigger than the checkmark box, I need to set it over 4 pixels. The reason for that is if it's 8 pixels bigger, there's 4 pixels on each side. So just set it over 4 pixels and it'll be centered. So as you can tell here, burst knockout div is going to be relative, and it's going to be at a z-index of 2. And the reason for that is that needs to go above the bursts. And the bursts are going to be in their own div, and they are going to be absolute positioned, and they are going to be a z-index of 1. So there's some layering. Basically, whenever you have magic is just sleight of hand. So we're doing that kind of same concept with Webflow. So we're flexing stuff, we're center aligning it. And kind of a fun thing is that, for these bursts, they're basically going to be, let me see if I can remember. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divs. And those divs are essentially just lines. As you can tell there. So that's a weird kind of bug that I've been noticing in Webflow, is that when I try to do the ratio, it'll hop up and down, but I'm sure they're working on it. So I just deal with it. And so as you can tell here, we have our first burst line. It's just a div. We're going to round the corners here. And then I'm going to, duplicate this class. I duplicated this element. And as you can tell here, this is why it makes it pretty quick. We're saying 40 positive. So that is a rotation of 40. We just have to make that one thing. So as you can tell here in a second, I'm going to now duplicate that, and we're going to make this negative. So this should be neg. Yep, and then I just go here and do a negative. Okay, so now we need to center align everything within this burst. So I just set everything to absolute. Do not do any type of positioning. Those presets positioning where it's upper left or bottom, whatever. Don't do anything. It'll automatically align. And then now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of, refining that burst knockout to have a little bit more rounded corners. The other thing too is I made, because when you put those to the when you rotate those bursts, you need to optically account for that. So I made them 110%, so that way when they're going vertically, they look like they're a little bit closer to that vertical burst. Now what am I doing? So now what I'm doing is I'm creating one more vertical and I'm making it horizontal. This is just to make it so it looks like the burst is going all the way around. And so I'm going to go over there. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees, and boom, there we go. And then I also need to set it to absolute so that way it centers. Okay, so we got basically the bursts, but now I wanted to go just another extra step. So I thought, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and create some really kind of fun dots. And that's just to kind of give it the more kind of like explosion, like a little bit of enjoyment. You click the checkbox, you have completed this task. You are amazing. Let's give you a little bit of bursts and dots, and yeah. And so that's what we're doing now. So that is going to be a little bit laborious, but it is kind of fun. I may or may not speed this up. Who knows? Maybe I want you to sit here and just watch as I just place dots everywhere. As you can tell here, I am duplicating the elements and duplicating the class, just going dot one, dot two. See, this is where I feel like doing the add-on selector. I would have essentially, if I didn't do it where I duplicate things, if I just did it where I'm doing the add-on class, I would have .102, .103, .104, and it just gets really confusing to me. So do what you feel is best for you, especially when you're doing something like this, where this is, something a little bit more bespoke and custom. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be people who are going to be like, oh, you have to have your naming convention like 100% perfect. And it's like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. For this particular element, I think .1, .2, .3 is fine. Name it how you feel is best. Now, if you have a team, totally get it. You got to get your naming convention where the team and you are on the same page. And then, eventually, possibly the client. It's kind of interesting. There's a conversation around naming convention. I know that there's a company, I think they're called FinSuite. They do client first. The one thing that I've kind of noticed is, and again, it comes down to perspective and it's different for everybody, but I've never had a client come into a Webflow build and be like, oh yeah, I want to kind of like make a section. How do I do that? And having to have naming convention. I mean, if anything, I would just make them a component and they could just drag in the component and then edit parts of the component. The naming of the CSS classes is almost irrelevant. But again, different perspectives, different ways of doing things. So yeah, I'm just continuing to do the dots here. And another thing maybe that I've learned in the years of working with Webflow and WordPress and all that stuff is do what you feel is best for you. At the end of the day, the thing that matters most is the value that you're giving your client. The enjoyment that a user is getting when on your site, and essentially the goals that you're trying to accomplish with your audience. If those are being accomplished, you can tackle your CSS naming conventions later if you're not inclined to that. I've kind of learned that you have to figure out what's most important for your particular project. What's most important for your goals. Is CSS naming convention important for your goals? I would say probably not. But again, that's just me. I'm ranting. I will stop ranting and I will get back to talking about what's going on the screen. I am just kind of flopping around trying to get the dots to look good. Trying to get something. We're now in the final stage, interactions. This one is fun and also laborious because it's like kind of rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Okay, anyways. On the checkmark wrapper, we are setting a click tap interaction. We're going to call it checked because when I click it, it's the check state. So essentially what we need to do is we need to take And here is some of the value in working with divs for icons. What I'm doing right now is I'm trying to figure out, okay, if I want to animate something, I want to animate, it's almost like it's drawing in or a real quick kind of size in. So I needed to go sample the sizes. I'm going to go back to the check state. I'm going to go to the check mark horizontal and I'm going to go to size. And I'm going to say the width is, well, not O rem, but 0 rem for sure. And then I'm going to go to size and I'm going to say that the size at the end state is the rem that I have. I'm going to do outback, and this is going to give it a little bit of a bounce, a little bit of kind of dynamics here. So I'm essentially rinsing and repeating now. So I'm going back to the vertical and I am setting the vertical spine to be whatever size it was at the end state. And I'm going to have it out back and I'm going to see what that looks like. So that's kind of cool. Just kind of bounces in, kind of draws in, starts from 0 and kind of bounces in. That's really fun. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the bursts. So we're going to do the burst spines. So I'm going to do just a sizing. So I'm going to have it go from, I needed to double check and make sure here. So I hopped out of there and went and see, okay, what heights do I have? And I remembered, oh, that's right, 110% and then 100%. So this is going to be kind of easy. It's just, again, a little bit laborious with kind of rinse repeating what you're doing, but it's so worth it, I promise. So we're going to go to the burst spine vertical and we're going to go ahead and set the size to be, for that one, it's going to be 0% to start for the vertical, for the height. And then we're going to have it be 100% high. And I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this real quick. And now we're back. We're doing the final one on the spines. And so I think I'm going to go ahead and preview it to see what it looks like. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah. And now I'm moving on to the dots. So the dots are essentially just opacities, right? So we're going to start at 0% opacity and then go to 100% opacity. So I will fast forward to this. All right, it looks like we're finishing up the dots here. So I'm going ahead and doing some batch editing here, doing some ease in, making sure everything's good. And I go, oh yeah, that's looking cool. But we need to do a second step. Actually, we need to do two things. So one, we need to check and do the line out wrapper, right? Or the line out line. So we're just starting at 0%. And then we're going to, just go 100% wide. And it does where it looks like it's just, strike through. And then we're going to do out back. So it gives it that little bit of dynamicy. And then what we're doing is the check label. So we need to change the, I believe, what am I doing? I'm doing the text color. And we're making it to where it's sort of de-emphasized a little bit. So there we go. Now what we need to do is the check mark. We need to set the stroke to red and then the background fill to red. And the reason for that is that we want the check mark to change and be red and bold because, man, you did amazing. You completed your task. Good job. Let's go ahead and give you some extra love. So right now, I think I'm just refining stuff. What am I doing here? It looks like maybe I missed one of the spines. Oh, that's right. So I'm doing the second step. The second step is first step. You checked it. Check mark comes in. The bursts, the dots. What we want to do now is we want the bursts and the dots to go away. And we want the check mark to stay with the strike through. So that way when you uncheck it, it puts everything back to where it was, and then you could redo the checkbox explosion if you wanted to. So that's what I'm doing right now. Essentially, I'm just setting up a second a second step to the animation. And I should go through, I believe after I finish that up, I go and I change the check mark stroke and the background to go red. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward that real quick. All right, and now it looks like I'm just kind of refining stuff. So I'm doing a batch edit here to make sure everything kind of disappears at the same time. I think maybe I was like, oh, that's a little too quick. So I think I switch it to 45. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it's just kind of refining it. It's always, you just got to refine, you know, a tenth of a second. Then I'm setting the duration here. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Again, you can go ahead and refine it as you will. I would probably do one more round of refinement after I kind of give myself a little bit of a break. You know, have some fresh eyes and then come back to it. So anyways, so I believe I finished that part up. And then now we need to go to the checkmark wrapper, and we're going to go and set the stroke border color. And I'm going to go to the cream, and then we're going to go here and we're going to turn it into the red. And we're going to say, I think 0.3, and I'm using ease in. Usually for color changes and, you know, opacities, I'll use ease in. For elements that are drawing in or moving in, I will use in or out back. Just gives it a little bit more dynamicy. And maybe I like Jello. I don't know. And we're going here, and we're going to checkmark wrapper, and we're giving it the background color of the red. And so there we go. We got that element. So now I believe, what am I doing here? What am I doing? I think I'm just making some more adjustments. Oh yeah, I want the dots to go away quicker. I want them to go away first. And so let's see. Yeah, that's kind of cool. That's nice, neat, wonderful. And then what I needed to do is I need to go to the checkmark wrapper, and I need to set that to have a cursor of the pointer, so that way somebody knows to go ahead and click that. Boom! Now, I think there is one last step, right? We need to have the unchecked state. So it's really easy to do that. So you put all that work into making your animation, and now what you can do is you can duplicate that animation you just did. We're going to call it unchecked. And you're going to delete all of your non-initial states. Take all your initial states and make them not initial, and give them whatever settings you need to give them. And then now what you're doing is you reversed it. Boom, 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 boom. That's it.